changing the thoughts and the emotions that you have on a daily basis that say, you can't do this.
Right.
Change those to be more supportive of you going forward. That
Mhm.
changes your beliefs.
Yeah.
And once those beliefs start to, the old ones that you were carrying that said, I'm too old, I can't do this,
Yeah.
I'll never be able to pass,
Right.
or any of those feelings, once we get rid of those, it's amazing how everything just begins to evolve.
Hi, I'm Biz Cush, a life coach and therapist, and your host here on the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. We're talking to women all over the world who found their way back to themselves, to their inner knowing, to their intuition, to their wisest self. Hi, this is Biz Cush, and this is the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. Thanks for being here. We are on a break for the summer, but we're resharing some episodes throughout that feel relevant and seem important for the moment. And this next one is with Wendy Cole, who transitioned later in life. And her story is beautiful, and it feels important to share stories of trans women and men to support and normalize and advocate for all trans people. So I hope you'll enjoy that conversation. This was recorded last year, and it still feels amazing to hear her story. So I hope you enjoy that. If you missed the meetup in June with other highly sensitive women and me, there'll be another one in July, which I hope you can make. You can find out more at my website, elizabethcush.com. Cush is spelled with a C. And I hope you'll join me. I hope you'll make one of the meetups. I'm also building a membership for highly sensitive women so that we're not locked into just the meetups to connect and gather and be together and get and give support. So you can find out more about that as well. The Circle of Sacred Sensitivity on my website. I hope you'll check it out. I hope to see you at the next meeting and meetup. And I also hope you enjoyed this conversation with Wendy Cole. Hi, Wendy, and welcome to the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast.
Hi, Elizabeth. I'm so happy to be here. This is great.
Oh, it's so nice to have you. And I'm really excited about having an in-depth conversation with you. But before we get started, if you could share a little bit about yourself and what inspires you.
Well, just to put everything out there for the audience, I've always had this feeling of not belonging my entire life. And there are times I didn't even know if I belonged to myself. You see, I was born in the last century. I was born transgender. I transitioned in 2015. And now, 9 years later, I'm living in alignment with who I am, how I feel. I've achieved self awareness, self acceptance, and for the first time in my life, actually self love. As
Mm.
far as I'm concerned, it's much less about transitioning from somebody I wasn't and more about becoming who I always have been.
Mm.
After all, I was never really a man. Gender is between the ears, not between the legs. That's what they check you out when you're born.
Yeah.
And in terms of what I've learned over the last 9 years, everything that I've gone through facing this profound life change,
Mm-hmm.
everything I've learned applies to everybody else facing life changes. We all
Mm.
go through the same thing.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
all has to do with mindset. And as far as I'm concerned, all life change begins and is 80% between your ears.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine, I mean, you said born in the last century, but like as a child at that time, knowing that your sex didn't fit your gender, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying that right,
Mm-hmm.
that must have been a hard realization for you, your family. And I don't know
Yeah,
whether you knew that from what age. Yeah.
I had a sense of it from around 3.
Wow.
And by the time I was 5, 6, I knew there was a difference between me and the girls that I was playing with when I went to go
Mm-hmm.
visit my mother's friends.
Mm-hmm.
I knew there was a difference. And by 10, I couldn't hold it back anymore. It was that powerful.
Wow.
And I told my parents. And I did that in my own unique way.
Yeah.
I dressed up in my mother's clothes, whatever I could find that would fit, did my
Oh,
makeup, did my nails, and waited for my mother to come home from grocery shopping and told her, I'm a girl.
boy.
I've had to go through a lot over the last 9 years because it caused a real fissure in my relationship with my parents, especially my father. He really wanted a son and went through all
Um,
kinds of hoops to get one and was delighted when I arrived.
okay.
But by age 10, that was very difficult with him.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was, I've come to the realization that both my parents were products of their generation.
Yep.
They were protecting me from society
Yeah. Yeah.
because they knew only too well that society would not accept the fact that this little boy, born and assigned male at birth based on my physical anatomy, didn't match how my brain was wired.
Right.
In the second trimester of birth, when sexual differentiation begins to occur,
Mhm.
it's not common, but it's not uncommon either. That
Yeah.
something goes awry and the body goes with one gender and the brain goes with the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm convinced that's what happened with me from everything I've read.
Yeah.
And I struggled with that from age 10.
Mm-hmm.
By the time another major pivotal point came in my life, graduating from college,
Wow.
what do you do with the rest of your life? That's another big change.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was so miserable dealing with this. And again, it's something that I couldn't tell people.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
secret.
Yeah.
And I was repressing this and hiding this with every fiber of my being.
Yeah. I would imagine that. I mean, just knowing as a therapist, knowing what it means to your just the physical symptoms of repression too, right? Anxiety or
Mhm.
depression or stomach issues or whatever it is that might go along with that, that it's not just the holding back of the emotion, it's or the knowing, it's
Right.
it's all that goes along with that too. Yeah.
Well, my parents at age 10 took me to a psychiatric center,
Okay.
fairly well known. It was along the Hudson River between Beacon and Cold Spring, New York, about 50 miles north of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting with the psychiatrist, and
Mm-hmm.
he's telling my parents, well, he's too young to diagnose as transsexual.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's just some transvestism. Little boys do experiment. And once he has a career, he has a wife, he has a house and a family, he'll forget all about being a girl. At
Mm-hmm.
age 10, I spoke up to the psychiatrist in front of my parents and
Wow.
said, no, I'm a girl. And I was taken from the room. I waited in the waiting room. We had 5 sessions or so. Most of them were with my parents.
Okay.
And on the way home, after what turned out to be the last session, I was told, you're going to repress this, you're going to forget all about it. And if you don't, we're going to have you committed and fixed.
Oh gosh, that's
But that was at
terrifying.
10.
Yeah. Yeah.
At 22, when I was all set to graduate,
Yeah.
I found a psychiatrist who was willing to help me.
Mm.
And I decided I need to do something about this. I can't continue living like this. It's too painful.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Hiding, repressing, nothing felt right. I had been doing everything up to that point to check off the boxes to say that I was normal,
Right, right.
whatever that may
Just quote
be.
unquote fit in, right?
I
Yeah.
always used to refer to it as normal. So, at any rate, the psychiatrist wanted to take me to a quarterly meeting of psychiatrists from around the Tri City area. The
Okay.
quarterly meeting, I go in as his case study patient that day.
Mm.
Well, I start talking no more than 5 minutes or less. And this one gentleman stands up. Now, there's about 15 to 20 psychiatrists, MD psychiatrists in
Yeah.
this room, in a
Yeah.
hospital conference room. And he stands up and says, I'll see you all next quarter. I have seen and heard all I need to hear.
Mm.
And then looks at me and says, You're a freak. You should move to New York City and turn tricks like the rest of them.
Oh my gosh.
That was pretty much the end of me
Right?
that day. And it pretty much defined the end of me ever attempting to try and transition again. I'd been
Yeah.
coming out to local people that I knew. I had forced myself to go to an all men's college just to try and
Wow.
fit in.
Wow.
And you see how well that worked.
Oh,
So
goodness.
I found out from that. And keep in mind, this is back in the days way before PCs, way before cell phones, no internet. Try
Yeah.
and find information on this subject.
Right? No resources at your fingertips for sure.
None whatsoever. And I'd been through my college library and a couple of neighboring university libraries looking for information.
Yeah.
And it was pathetically very little. It was a very taboo subject.
Well, and even in the psychiatry realm, up until relatively recently, it's like there was something wrong with you
Mhm.
versus this is who you are. And we have to, like, this isn't a diagnosis, right?
Well, basically from age 22 to 2015. 2015 is when I hit another I had lots of dark periods during my life with
I would imagine.
depression, anxiety, fear, shame, guilt, everything.
Yep.
And I found out November or so of 2014, I was about ready to say, I'm all done. I'm tired of living. I'm tired.
Mm.
I just can't go on anymore. I had
Mhm.
everything all set up to kill myself.
Wow.
And I decided I've never gone on and looked online. I don't know if there's anything that's changed since back when I was 22.
Yeah.
And that's when I found out in 2012 the WPATH had successfully influenced the medical diagnosis to be a medical condition that you're
Right.
born with.
Right.
And it's now treatable with hormone therapy, and any necessary surgeries.
Yeah.
And that ended my desire to end it all right then and there.
Mm.
I went upstairs to my wife at the time and I said, Remember what because after we'd been married for 4 years and I couldn't take it anymore. And I finally told her about this, expecting to be divorced. We didn't get divorced. She decided that as long as I didn't do anything about this, we'd stay together. So I said to her, Remember what we talked about in 1978?
Mm.
And this is 2015.
Right.
Well, I'm starting therapy. I found out this has changed. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to find a therapist. And I wrote to clinics all around the Montgomery and Bucks County area, the clinics,
Yeah.
looking for a therapist who would be willing to help me and work with me.
Hmm.
And in January of 2015, I went to my first therapy session, which was huge.
Yeah.
I walked in, it was an intake session, so it was a little bit longer. I felt a real connection going into that with Stephanie because of her profile, her
Mm,
picture. I could felt the connection with her.
nice.
And that was just reinforced on first meeting. And I sat there and I literally, Elizabeth, I just poured my guts out.
Wow.
I hadn't talked to anybody about how I felt in 45 years.
I can't even imagine holding that. So, I mean, I understand why, but
Uh-huh.
just the toll that takes on you to keep
Oh,
that
God, yes.
hidden.
It's just huge trying to hide all of this.
Yeah.
And it just felt so good to really put it all out there and have somebody actually hear me say the words. At the end, I stood up to leave and we're exchanging comments back and forth. And as I'm going for the door, I look down at Steph and she's sitting there with my folder on her lap.
Hmm.
And she looks up at me and she says, "What's your name?" And I snapped back, "Wendy."
Wow.
And immediately, to my joy, delight, amazement, she wrote, crossed out my male facsimile's name and wrote
Mm,
Wendy on my file. From that point forward, I was Wendy. For the first time in my entire life, somebody actually accepted me for who I am without any need to really understand it.
yeah.
Just
She
accept
saw you. Yeah.
it. By my third session, I went as Wendy.
Mm,
I hadn't
wow.
I hadn't cross-dressed in over 30 years.
Oh my
I
gosh.
couldn't do that anymore. It just because my wife had given me permission to do that in private as long as it stayed our secret. Again, another secret.
Right? Oh my gosh.
And I hated cross-dressing. It hurt too much to take everything off because then I realized I wasn't being me.
Right. 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 It's like taking off the mask or whatever.
That's exactly it.
Mm,
When I was dressed as Wendy, I felt real. I felt myself. It felt great. And I just
mm.
wanted to go see the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
I don't think people can realize the depth and the power that this has over someone's psychological well being.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think that, well, especially today, we are not living in a world where a lot of people are willing to sort of put themselves in other shoes, like to really empathize with what that would be like to have to,
Mhm.
well, hold those secrets, but to live your life as a lie almost, like, well, not even
Well,
almost, right? I
I
mean,
had I had a client in 2022 that opened up her first session with me. I'm scared. I'm tired of living a lie, and I have no clue what I'm doing. She'd been
mm,
cross dressing for years and experimenting and wondering and everything. She was angry, depressed, all of the same feelings that I had.
yeah, I bet.
And my response to her when she said that to me was great. That's why you're here. Let's get to work. We're going to fix all this.
Yeah. Oh
And
my gosh.
what I discovered with myself and with some guidance from my therapist, and then I took it and ran with it from there,
Hmm.
was what I call the internal work,
Mm,
changing the thoughts and the emotions that you have on a daily basis that say, you can't do this.
right.
Change those to be more supportive of you going forward. That
Mm,
changes your beliefs.
yeah.
And once those beliefs start to, the old ones that you were carrying that said, I'm too old, I can't do this,
Yeah.
I'll never be able to pass,
Right.
or any of those feelings, once we get rid of those, it's amazing how everything just begins to evolve. I went from scared to death, no clue how I was going to do this, to living full time in my own apartment as Wendy in 6 months.
Wow. Wow. And so, if you don't mind my asking, how old were you when this, this beginning of your, transition began?
I was 67.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And I really don't believe there's any such thing as being too old.
Well, I mean, honestly, I swear, I think I say that on the podcast or within my group practice or in my practice too, that with clients, that if life needs to change, it can, right? Or if we need to change, we can. Like there's no time limit on healing, on living more authentically, making big changes. Yeah, it should happen, even
Mhm.
when especially when you're 67, if you've been waiting all your life for it to happen, right? Or
Yep.
hoping that it could.
Well, one
Yeah.
of the other things I always dreamed of was because Elizabeth, I would fall asleep at night as a little kid. My parents were active in the Methodist church, so I
Mm,
did Sunday school and all that other happy stuff.
yeah.
And I would fall asleep at night praying to wake up, and my body would be different. I didn't really know what it needed to be, but I just knew the way it was was not me.
Right. Right.
And that my closet would be filled with dresses and skirts, and I would be a girl.
Mm,
And I even had a high school friend ask me, well, if your parents had agreed to let you be a girl, would you have done it back then? Oh,
mm,
yeah.
yeah.
I really needed to.
Yeah.
This was very strong in me.
Yeah. No, I feel that. And I'm curious as to how this new part of your life has impacted just your overall well-being.
I saw my therapist for 5 years.
Mm,
During the last, I'd say 2.5 years, it was like on a monthly basis. I
hmm.
called it my check-in.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Love my check-ins.
Nice.
And but I think we got to almost to the third year, and she said to me, "You really don't need to come anymore. You're probably the healthiest person I've ever known
Oh,
as a result of all of this."
yeah.
But what I learned was how to control my thoughts and my emotions, and how to shift all of those to be supportive of me so that I could just go forward. And when I meet people, put out the energy that welcomes them. And that's so different from the way my male facsimile was.
Mm,
He was miserable.
yeah.
Shame and guilt for my parents, shame and guilt for having, I was always told, have a wife. You'll forget all about being a girl. Well, every girl that I ever dated and wound up telling about this because I just wanted to be upfront with them. Of course, they left,
Yeah.
which is understandable.
Yep. Yeah.
And so when I decided that after the 1970 event with the psychiatrist, I decided, no, I'll just do what I was told at age 10 and by my parents and anybody else that they ever had me in front of. Just go forward, get married, give the whole normal life of a average guy
Yeah.
a try.
Yeah.
And it didn't work for me. It
Mm-mm.
really didn't.
No, well, you were not living authentically, right? I mean, you had to shut off that whole part of you, that whole who you were.
Exactly. There's so many people that think this is a choice. It's not.
Yeah.
And one of my friends in the transgender community that I met fairly early on, she always used to say, and she's right, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy.
Well, I was going to say, who's choosing who? Well, like if you didn't fully believe you were, if you knew you were the wrong gender, of course you would want to make that change. But if you weren't convinced, why would you put yourself through that, right? Like if this
Exactly.
was a choice, why would you make that choice? Oh gosh, my camera again.
Yep. It's really not a choice, and it really doesn't go away either.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Um,
unless you're
I'm
fully
evidence
living
of
in
that.
denial. Yeah.
And
Mm.
I've talked with quite a few people that hit their 50s and 60s, and they're saying, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. Well, that was one of the other things that my therapist, Steph, got me through.
Mm.
During our first 2 sessions, the guilt and the shame.
Yeah.
The guilt for having lied by omission to my
Mm.
wife.
Yeah.
We were married for 40 years.
Wow. Wendy. Oh
But
my gosh. Wow. Yeah.
and I told her 4 years into it, and we just didn't get divorced. She had her reasons, and I had mine. Mine were hopelessness and feeling that there was nothing I could do about this.
Right. There were no choices other than to live this life. Yeah.
Actually, that psychiatrist in 1970 was right. My options were very limited. Move to a major city, preferably San Francisco
Mm-hmm.
or New York, Manhattan,
Mm-hmm.
and live underground.
Right. Right.
What I've since found out is there, in both places, there were a large community.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've talked to quite a number of other people in their 50s and 60s about doing this and all, and they didn't do it either for the same reason I didn't. I really, at that point in my life, wanted to have something in the way of a career and a life that was part of society.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what we're told we're supposed to do, right? I mean, that's the American dream is to get a job, be contributing member of society, show up,
Mm-hmm.
dress the way you're supposed to.
Doing all the things you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was not me at that point. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I got by
Yeah.
and I did everything I needed to do just to survive. I was not social.
Mm.
I didn't engage with people. And my male facsimile would have never spoken in public like I do now, or much less come on all these podcasts and be totally candid and open.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you are coming on podcasts and being open. I'm curious too, like the culture around difference today, just even around being a woman, feels incredibly threatening, and transgender rights are being challenged and questioned at every turn, it feels like, across the United States, at least. How is that impacting you today? Just not necessarily personally, but just your overall well-being and how you're feeling.
Well, one of the things that when I'm working with somebody going through this and changing their whole mindset around as they get started,
Mm-hmm.
mindset is critical
Yeah.
because it's our thoughts, our emotions, and our beliefs that will block us from seeing what's possible for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once we start changing that, the next thing is to get them used to being in public.
Mm.
And I have ways of doing that, which involves what I call life tests.
Mm.
Go out and try something
Mm-hmm.
and keep it simple and all. In the community, they use the word passing a lot. Do I
Okay.
pass as a woman?
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that word.
Okay.
It implies failure.
Yeah.
It has negative connotations like you're fooling somebody.
Right.
What I do is I teach them behaviors and mannerisms, differences between male and female.
Mm.
There's a whole slew of those. And
Sure.
the what I set for my personal goal going forward when I started in 2015 was, I don't know if I can do this, but all I want to do is just blend in as any other woman in everyday life.
Yeah.
Keep it that simple. And then with the continuum of gender,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you are in the 50% mark or a little bit above, you're going to blend in just fine.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be perfect. The word passing means, in some respects, perfection.
That's true.
Whereas,
Like, because if you're not passing, you're failing, right?
uh-huh, but if
Yeah.
you're just blending in and all, you're going to have a good time with it. And that's one of the things that I encourage is let's enjoy this.
Mm-hmm.
I see people that are doing this on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And even with a therapist, at times, they're still winding up getting scared.
Sure.
And what I do is tell them what they're going to face when they go out to try this next life test, when they go out to do their legal name change. I prep them for everything they're going to go through. Here's what you say, here's how you, and don't worry about presenting yourself to another person.
Mm.
It's, it again also depends on where you are in the country, but
Absolutely. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's all very doable, very, can be very exciting to do that. As far as what's going on in the country with the laws that people are trying to pass and all of that,
Yeah.
this is one of the reasons why I'm putting myself out very visibly and consistently,
Mm.
is I want to inform and educate people in society who are open to listening to what I have to say,
Yeah.
and hopefully change some perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't expect people to understand me. If
Mm.
you've never woken up in the morning and looked at yourself in the mirror and questioned your gender, most people never do that.
Mm,
I'm
yeah. Yeah.
sure most people never get up and say, I should have been a girl, or I should have been a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not common. So unless you've actually had that experience, I don't expect anyone to understand this.
Yeah.
What I want to do is give them the knowledge and the experience that I've encountered
Mm-hmm.
to show them that this is real. It's not a choice, and it's who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really, really appreciate your coming on the podcast and sharing your story and your wisdom. If there was a piece of wisdom you thought was important to share with the listeners, what would that be?
Being yourself and being true to yourself is probably one of the most important things in life. And going through the last 9 years has not only changed my entire mental outlook on myself and on people around me,
Mm,
it's also had a significant and positive effect on my overall physical health.
I bet.
I'm not churning up all that anxiety and all those emotions that trigger the body to produce all these
Yeah. Cortisol
chemicals
and yeah,
and
yeah, right.
neuropeptides and everything else that get produced.
Yeah.
So I've lost almost 70 pounds
Wow.
in weight over the last 9 years. I've no longer type 2 diabetic,
Mm,
no longer have the blood work problems that I had. Everything comes back clear.
isn't that
And
something?
I'm far more social than I've ever been in my entire life.
Yeah. Well, you seem very at ease in who you are.
But I know being yourself and being true to yourself is so important for your life to in your life to be able to achieve what you need to achieve and your purpose. I am taking this as putting myself out to talk with people is my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can leave behind some legacy of knowledge of what it's like to have lived for 67 years in the wrong body.
Yeah.
Because at 69, I went to NYU Medical Center and I had surgery with Dr. Rachel Bluebond and Dr. Lee Zhao. And that was one of the most exciting days. I literally ran into the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
And on a follow-up visit, I think it was my second follow-up visit,
Mm-hmm.
I drive to Hamilton, New Jersey, take the New Jersey Transit up to Penn Station, get out, cross 7th Avenue, and I'm walking down 30th Street, and I go by this whole block is all black glass, highly reflective. And I'm standing there in the middle of the sidewalk. Everybody's walking by. I'm just amazed. Wow, you finally did it. You're finally you.
Amazing.
It just felt so incredible. And that's when I realized during the first probably 2 years of living authentically as Wendy,
Mm-hmm.
there were times where I felt like an imposter because my body was still wrong.
Yeah.
I had to get my birth defect corrected.
There you go. I love that. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. If people wanted to know more about you and the work that you do, how do they find you?
MeetWendyCole.com.
Awesome.
And it's that simple. There's my newsletter, and you can schedule on my calendar. And there is a link that takes you to my main website as well. But it's MeetWendyCole.com.
Awesome. Well, I will share that in the show notes. And I just so appreciate your coming on the podcast.
Okay, Elizabeth, thank you for having me.
I'm always blown away by the wisdom of my guests and their willingness to share their stories of growth and change and transition. And I really appreciated Wendy being so open and honest with us here on the podcast. It feels particularly important to share Wendy's story today when so many rights are being minimized or taken away or hacked away at, where it may not feel as safe to be in the world living as yourself. And I really appreciate Wendy being here and being so open and honest and sharing with us parts of her journey. And I'm sure the fact that she lived her life suppressing who she really was for so many years, I'm sure there are parts of the story we have not heard. And she shared after our conversation that there will be a podcast series with another host, another podcaster, really diving into her life journey and as she moved into transitioning. So I hope that that will be available by the time this episode gets live, because I will definitely share that here. But, you can search out Wendy Cole and find her info if you're interested in knowing more about her and her journey. I appreciate you all being listeners and a part of this podcast. Sharing women's stories feels so important to me in a world where women's rights, along with rights of minorities and the rights of the LGBTQIA community, are being compromised and shut down and taken away and minimized. It just doesn't feel as safe as it did. And so I appreciate everybody here listening, tuning in, being a part of this journey of the podcast, listening to these amazing women tell their stories. If you want to get on the list for my newsletter, you can. I I love to write, so I share essays and I talk about what I'm reading and what I'm listening to and a little bit about my personal life, although I'm a pretty private person, but I do share snippets of my personal life there too. If you want to be a part of that, sign up for my newsletter at elizabethcushcoaching.com/sign up. And you will get the podcast as well as the newsletter right in your inbox. And I hope you keep listening. I look forward to connecting with you next time here on the podcast. Thanks for listening to the Awaken Your Wise Woman podcast. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Music by Andy Cush, sound editing by Laura Disler, and show notes by Kathy Cush. If you'd like more information about me, Biz Cush, and the resources shared today, go to awakenyourwisewoman.com.